Hello and welcome to episode 2 of News Trash here on the Geek Show, where we talk about news. Well, trash about news. It's kind of a say what you see concept that we have here. It's not one of these intellectual graphs and bar charts news programs. It's news trash with me, Rob, and other Rob. Say hello.
Hello.
There he is. So, introductions,
Yeah. How's it going?
If we were an American podcast, we'd talk for about 9 minutes about something that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
I have a chip on my shoulder about American video game podcasts because I've literally tried all of them. And I gave up of all of them.
Well, there's a lot of preamble when it comes to the American podcasts, and I've noticed that they do have a tendency to avoid getting to the point. I'm guilty of that. I know I'm guilty of that. But thankfully, I have you to tell me off.
Yeah, and we're English, so we're kind of... Enough of that waffle. Get on with the point. What?
We don't stand there twirling our mustaches.
Yeah, we best hurry up with this podcast because I've got some crumpets on. So, don't want to burn me crumpets.
I've got tea with the vicar in half an hour.
Yeah, these are all... If you're not familiar with these stereotypes which every game-playing person accuses of English people.
Oh, yes.
So, if you're guilty of those, bad. But anyway, I think we better just jump straight into it, really. Not for the sort of twaddle.
Jumping straight in. So, anyone who's after a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X or Series S, well, there's a shortage, as we all know, because of the pandemic, everything like that. Now, AMD, who had a big year in 2020, they've said that demand for their gaming chips has exceeded supply, and there are going to be PC and next-gen chip PC and next-gen chip shortages throughout the first half of 2021.
It wasn't that, was it? It was a specific thing that was really lacking.
Yeah. See, AMD does some of the core chips for the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, because in PC terms, the Ryzen processor is basically kicking ass. Intel just cannot keep up. And so the problem is when it comes to games consoles and development for those consoles, is it worth publishers developing for the next-gen consoles if there aren't that many next-gen consoles sold?
Well, there's all sorts of things that crop up from this, isn't there? For one, there's always issues when it comes to getting a next-gen console in the first year of production. I don't think it's ever been as bad as it is now because of obvious circumstances and scalpers basically being emboldened in a way that you don't think they've ever been emboldened. Like claiming stock before it's even gone on sale was the big one from Argos, the UK stockist, recently, which is a big one. So there's all of that to contend with, which makes getting one basically like winning the lottery. Yeah, effectively. On the other hand, there's limitations in a way which there never was in current gen tech. It's been reported by many other places that basically the PlayStation 4 core unit and the Xbox One core unit were incredibly underpowered at release.
Yeah.
So there's that idea there that did they continue to release stuff on PlayStation 4? Well, I'm not sure. Because for me, I haven't played Control because I think it'd set my machine on fire, give off a lot of heat and be noisy, or Last of Us Part 2, or Ghost of Tsushima, or Doom Eternal, or any of these things, because I basically hit the limit of what I can actually manage reasonably without threatening the life of that machine, and it is my streaming box, so I kind of need it for other things.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I've got a PS4 Pro, and I'd say that if you wanted to play any of those games, then you want to play them on a PS4 Pro.
even then, that's got like a notorious reputation for being noisy as a jet engine. Even though with people who say that, I don't think they've ever heard a jet engine.
Yeah, it's not that bad, I'll be honest. It can be noisy, but if you're wearing headphones while you're playing a game, you don't hear it.
Right, but the point is, it's kind of as far as like a next gen launch, it's probably one of the more successful as far as units shipped.
Yeah.
But it's also one of the most disastrous ever.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to it being successful and disastrous, because obviously the pandemic has had an effect on how disastrous it's been, but it's also had a direct effect on how successful it's been because everybody has been wanting stuff to do at home. Since you can't leave home, you want to basically be entertained at home, and what better entertainment than playing games? And if you look at the retro games market, the cost of PlayStation 2 games went through the roof during 2020. I mean, if you look at the actual graphs of it, the cost of my PS2 collection it's great. I've been sitting on that nest egg for years, and
yeah, it's a nest egg which you never cash in, so it's kind of irrelevant, isn't it?
Well, not really. I mean, I may cash some of them in. I didn't realize that some of the games I've got are really, really hard to get hold of.
I imagine so.
I still have no idea, right? And anyone who's watching this, if you have an idea of the price, let me know. Because I have a copy, an original, sealed, brand new, with the tear strip, copy of Star Ocean Director's Cut from Japan, with the actual booklet it comes with. It's all still sealed, and I cannot find a price for it anywhere on the internet.
So, comment below.
Yeah.
Let Rob know.
Yeah, I would love to know how much it's worth, because I have no idea.
But as far as the next generation consoles and graphics, GPUs.
Yeah.
It's putting like new games on. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's no equipment to sell or produce these content machines. Sorry.
Yeah.
At the same time, producers of games are basically put under the cosh production-wise as far as working from home makes it even more difficult.
Yeah.
So even though people want consoles, there's no real point in them because there's no games being released for them.
Exactly. And so
it's kind of like a vortex of things going round and round.
Yeah, it's catch-22 situation. You know, there's no way out of it unless, we kind of go sideways. The irony of that, though, is that in the midst of all this, there's been some decisions that Sony have made that have been frowned on.
Which one? And there's a laundry list, so you can have to be more specific.
Well, the perception that Sony has effectively abandoned Japan is the one that I'm talking about.
It's a perception in the West. It's all but an accepted truth in the East.
Yeah. Which probably explains, it probably goes partway to explaining why 99% of video game sales in Japan have been for the Switch.
That is it.
Even though, I mean, that's just in 2021, apparently. So far in 2021, Sony have announced that they've sold 4.5 million PlayStation 5s worldwide, but
it's mostly in America. I would hazard a guess and say it's mostly in America.
Yeah. I mean, yes, we talked about the almost riot that happened in Japan during...
No, if you're seeing the footage on the news, it was a riot.
Yeah. So we talked about that last time, but this time, I think Sony's decision with Japan, it's stomping ground. So that's its home ground.
I mean, personally, for me, the reason why I've been so loyal to Sony all of these years from PlayStation 1 to now is because that was the best place to go for the broadest variety of Japanese games.
Yeah.
And looking at the first-party producers of Sony games, the only Japanese ones are Polyphony Digital, who do Gran Turismo. And if you like that, you like that. That's fine. If you don't, you're never going to bother with it.
Yeah.
And Japan Studio, who've had people leaving to set up their own thing, in the case of some of the Silent Hill alumni. And besides that, they do little bits and pieces, Astro's Playroom, nothing that really says, come on board, this is the console for you.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Atelier franchise, which everybody knows already. I've been a big fan of the Atelier franchise for
everybody.
Decades.
So you just walk past people on the street and they say, hey, you know me, I love that Atelier, me.
Actually, I do.
No, and he talks to anybody about anything, Rob. So yeah, probably.
But yeah, I'm a big fan of the Atelier franchise, and I know Koei Tecmo have historically done stuff almost exclusively for the PlayStation. They have done stuff for the Nintendo Switch. Whichever Nintendo console has been out. Things like what was it? They did that Zelda Muso type game.
Hyrule Warriors.
Hyrule Warriors, that was it. I think there's a sequel to that coming out at some point as well.
It's already out. I think I don't follow Nintendo that closely, so yeah. It's around sometime soon.
And I would not, I can't see Koei Tecmo continuing to only release stuff for the PlayStation because I don't think it's financially viable. And I think a lot of other developers who've historically just been exclusively Sony are going to go the same way. It's no longer financially viable to just release on a Sony platform.
Yeah, it's like not all Atlas is PlayStation exclusive, but Persona is.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, that could have done a lot better, considering it was like acknowledged as one of the finest RPGs of the previous generation.
Yeah.
Probably missed out on a lot of potential sales on the Xbox. But the point is, Japan don't feel like PlayStation is for them anymore, which brings up different questions. One, on Sony's side, they're not really producing stuff for that demographic, that nation. Because look at all the first-party stuff; it's all North American, like largely.
Yeah.
But also the way that games are played in Japan is different than it is elsewhere in the world for the principal reason that handheld and mobile has been sort of rampant in that market.
Oh yeah. There are a couple of interesting moves from Japanese publishers, ironically enough, on the back of all of this that's happening in video games. Bandai Namco, for example, have started doing more stuff that's aimed at a Western audience. Stuff like the Dark Pictures anthology. That's majorly for a Western audience.
Oh, yeah.
That's majorly for a Western audience. And rumor has it that Konami is actually aiming for that angle as well.
Well, they've been doing that for a long time. If you remember the evolution of the Silent Hill series.
Yeah.
That in the first 3, not 4. I'd include the room in that too.
Yeah.
That sort of like a very Japanese industrial horror, industrial death horror, whatever you want to call it.
Well, I mean, Silent Hill is one of those games where it was very clearly a Japanese horror game, but it was very much aimed at a Western audience. The cast of characters...
Not the first 4. The first 4, even though the cast of characters was American, after the 4th one, when it started getting into the working with Nintendo and just kind of being all over the place, that was them very, very much tailoring things to a Western audience.
Yeah. Yes, it was. But apparently Konami are looking to do that in the future and follow the path that's kind of laid out by Bandai Namco. And it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. It will be interesting to see what they come up with. They've got a lot of IPs that they can work with and a lot of IPs that they can bring out again.
Yeah, I mean, they're still into gaming and like some people's suggestion, but they really need to start pulling their thumb out their ass and being a games publisher once again. Taking a little break there, it's time to mention what else is happening with the Geek Show, specifically the Patreon. If you head to patreon.com/The Geek Show, you will be met by 2 tiers. First tier is basically £1, which is a thank you tier, and it's also a tier to get access to our first Patreon exclusive podcast, Directors Lottery, in which me and Graham of Pop Screen will have a big list of directors, and we will pick one of them at random, hence the name Directors Lottery, and we'll talk about them. In the first episode, it was Robert Hamer who directed Kind Hearts and Coronet and It Always Rains on Sunday, which were the 2 movies that he is known for. In the second episode, just to show the breadth of stuff that we cover in that podcast, it is John Waters, who is known for being a saucy boy, and his movies that we're talking about are Hairspray, which was a baptism of fire for me, that you'll say, and Multiple Maniacs, which is, the saucy boy, John Waters. At the $3 Patreon level is a Patreon exclusive extra episode of Pop Screen. He does 4 episodes a month, and the 5th one is paid for. Also on the Geek Show, you head over to thegeekshow.co.uk and you'll find an entire variety of written movie reviews, as well as our entire selection and archive of podcasts.
Moving on to the next article, Google Stadia.
Oh,
this is a story that's been in development since Stadia was announced, kind of.
When it was first announced, though, we did like an Impossible Mission about it, and we thought, oh, this is great. This is represents a potential future for video games and what could be possible. Reality wasn't quite so kind.
I mean, Google Stadia, coming on the back of things like OnLive and Gaikai, where game streaming was kind of first practiced. Well, I use the term loosely because there have been other attempts at game streaming as well. But the problem with game streaming is that it's something that I think is still very much in its infancy. And I think that there are still a lot of people who won't buy into the whole idea of streaming games.
Well, internet being the way it is, so wildly inconsistent from country to country. Places like Australia having bad internet, as far as you understand it. Rural places being non-existent. It's just cutting too many people out of the audience.
Exactly.
So, what did they do? What did Google do?
Google have basically announced that they are shutting down their Stadia games and entertainment studios. Now, these are the studios responsible for developing first-party games for the Stadia platform, right? So it's closing those down, but it is still open to third-party developers. In fact, what Google is doing, it's opening up its technology to those third-party developers. So it still wants third-party developers to make games for the platform, which is great and all, in a sense. See, here's the thing. Back when Google first announced Stadia...
My expression kind of says everything.
Wait for it. There is a punchline here that's coming, and it's kind of astonishing that this, that very few people noticed this when it first happened. Right? Back when Google first announced Stadia... back whenever that was, I can't remember.
2018 feels right.
Yeah, I think it was. It was March 2019. Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. Right now, at the auditorium where Google executive Phil Harrison was about to reveal Stadia, Google had asked Frank Cifaldi and people from the Video Game History Foundation to create. Well, a nice little display about the history of video games and certain landmarks from the history of video games. Now, according to Cifaldi, several months later, He said, confession, we were paid to provide these things for the Stadia display. They didn't know what they wanted, changed the scope about 4 times, and ended up mishmashing 2 different concepts that worked together into one that didn't.
What did they get?
Well, the display is kind of notorious now for having a Dreamcast, a Nintendo Power Glove, and a copy of E.T. for the Atari 2600, followed by a pedestal that just said coming soon.
So basically, the message of the advert is here. I wouldn't call Dreamcast a total failure, but it did fail.
Yeah.
The other 2 are notorious failures.
I mean, E.T., of all the things.
So coming soon, the 4th in a series of notorious video game failures.
The writing was on the wall from the beginning.
It was. I mean, it didn't have to be. It's just they thought they could throw the weight around and conquer video gaming.
I mean, according to Harrison, having video games streamed to any screen is the future of this industry, and will continue to invest in Stadia and its underlying platform to provide the best cloud gaming experience for our partners and the gaming community. This has been the vision of Stadia since the beginning. And that's all nice and all.
Yeah. The irony is, he tried to force it.
Yeah.
Look at the Xbox One launch. It was disastrous.
Yeah.
Because of their messaging. But over the phase of the Xbox One generation, they never really changed. They just sort of slowly climbed back to where they wanted to be at the beginning. And everybody's like, oh, this is the future. This is amazing. But forcing the matter, the industry is very, very reluctant.
Yeah.
So you got to, it's a slow ascent. Hang on. Yeah, ascent. You can't just sort of do enter a cheat code and then jump from the bottom of Everest to the top of Everest, because that's sort of how I imagine this sort of climb from one type of video game industry to another type of video game industry. So if they had a little bit more patience and tried to do it as just a digital download platform and then slowly integrated streaming, might not have been disastrous.
See, this is a lot of analysts are looking at Stadia now, and some of them have some interesting ideas about why the development side of Stadia, the games development side of Stadia, ultimately failed. And one of the reasons that they think is because it was never part of the original vision. The original idea for Stadia was that it was a more advanced, more up-to-date, more technologically sound version of Gaikai, OnLive, those sorts of things. So you had a bunch of third-party developers making games, and you basically had some massive servers somewhere, and people could stream the games from those servers to whatever device they were using. That's the idea. Simple idea, sound idea, right?
Yes.
It's not a bad idea. Where Google started kind of deviating from the idea was that the vision changed because Stadia started up its own development studio, acquired a second, and founded a third less than a year ago.
Well, you gotta respect them. They got a lot in a short space of time.
Yeah. And the thing is, making games became part of the vision for a period of time. And the problem with that is when you're, if you're making games because you want to make money, then fine, there are ways you can do that.
It's served Activision, Blizzard, and EA very well.
Thing is, they don't make the games. They just have an idea for...
Oh, they've got many, many studios underneath them, but yeah
exactly. But games development itself, as you and I already know, and as everyone else watching this already knows, or hopefully already knows, games development is a new type of art form, right? It's not something that comes straight away.
I wouldn't describe it as an art form, but yeah, sure.
You get what I mean. It's art by committee kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
You have a lot of creative people who work in the games industry, and they're bringing their artistic sensibilities to this process. You don't automatically get character designs that you can pull out your backside. You don't automatically get level designs that come out of nowhere. people, yes, there are the technical side of things. You have the people who actually do all the programming work and everything like that. But all of this visual side of things, all of the audio side of things, they have to come from people who are creative.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
And so when you're making a video game, it is kind of art by committee. And ultimately, you might end up with something amazing. But you also might end up with something that's trash.
Yeah. They try to be too much too quick.
Yeah.
I think it's the arrogance of Google as a company, because they're one of the few trillion-dollar organizations on the planet, to think they can just sort of stroll in.
Yeah.
And conquer an industry when you can't. Sony didn't become a titan, a massive industry-leading titan overnight.
Yeah.
Sega and Microsoft didn't. They had to build up brick by brick by brick. Yeah, it's what Amazon and Google have done is basically try to build a castle on a beach.
Yeah, exactly. And the interesting thing about talking about Sony and Microsoft is both companies kind of fell into video games a little bit by accident, right?
Yeah.
Because the Sony PlayStation, the original PlayStation, was meant to be a Nintendo console originally.
Yeah, and the news has came out recently that Microsoft tried to buy Nintendo. Yeah.
But not only that, Microsoft kind of built the Xbox on the back of the failure of the Dreamcast. And the Dreamcast ran on Windows CE technology, right? So the collaboration between Sega and Microsoft was already there. When the Dreamcast failed, Microsoft had access to all of this stuff and thought, you know what? We can do something with this.
Yeah. So it's a slow climb. You can't just jump in feet first and expect everybody to bow before you, which I think is what Google kind of did.
Amazon did exactly the same thing. And they spent $500 million
in a year. Watched last week's episode. Yeah.
It's crazy. But, that's how things work. Speaking of Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually does.
Famous last words there, feels.
See, the thing is, now that Uncle Bezos has stepped down as the CEO, I'm going to start calling him Uncle Bezos.
Well, he stepped down as CEO and become Amazon overlord.
Yeah, he's kind of the secret. He's kind of the shadowy overlord behind Amazon. He's like the Emperor in Star Wars. You never see him, but he's always there.
He's like the guy with the cat in Inspector Gadget.
Oh, the Claw. Oh,
yeah, he's the Claw. He is. I always assumed the Claw was bald. I don't know why. He was in my head.
See, in my head now, all I've got is Jeff Bezos in that Claw voice going, "I'll get you yet, Google."
Yeah, we go. So what have Amazon been up to?
So anyway, the guy who's taken over from Jeff Bezos, Andy Jassy, who,
he was in charge of digital services like the Amazon server farm thing.
Yes. Well, he believes that Amazon can succeed in games if they just hang in there.
He's technically right.
Yeah.
But I don't think he realizes the time frame that would take.
Yeah. And he's basically stated, some businesses take off in the first year and others take many years, though we haven't consistently succeeded yet in games development, in Amazon Game Studios. I believe we will if we hang in there.
Yeah, it's technically true, but he's sort of trying to genetically engineer, the company's trying to genetically engineer adult sheep rather than growing it from like a little baby, and a ewe into a adult sheep. So you got to put in the groundwork. It is notoriously difficult to get into the video games industry. It's one of the hardest industries to crack.
Yeah. Bloomberg's report on the division's struggles and the employee complaints of a bro culture that was driving women out of the company. The head of Amazon Game Studios, Mike Frazzini, has said to Andy Jassy, "We have zero tolerance for this type of behavior or anything less than a fully equitable and inclusive environment."
Yeah. I mean, when he says it'll take time, I'm saying sort of just honestly put this generation, this current generation, the PS5, Xbox Series X generation, not rush into things.
Yeah.
Maybe buy a few little studios, publish games independently,
Yeah.
but spend the next generation, the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X generation, into research and development. Because this is an industry which is forever changing. You could make a streaming box and the whole idea of streaming fails in 3 years, for example.
Yeah.
It won't, but perhaps you have to, it's a long industry. You have to basically be in it for the long haul and take it very, very seriously, because it has effectively bankrupted a lot of organizations. Not as big as Amazon, admittedly, but it's bankrupted a lot of organizations and a lot of people. So take your time. It'll come eventually.
Yes. It's one of those things. Technically, Andy Jassy, as you said, he's right. If you hang in there, ultimately, you'll get somewhere. You'll make some progress. But it's not going to be immediate, and it might take longer than he expects.
I mean, look at Amazon Studios. I'd say now, just about, it's a powerhouse.
Yeah.
But they've been around for a long time.
Netflix is the same, right? Netflix are making stuff now, but how did Netflix start?
It was basically a DVD rental service.
Exactly. And that was when?
A long time
Early
ago.
noughties? Early noughties?
It's a slow climb, these mega industries. You got to work your way in step by step by step, one day at a time.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? There might be a major contender, but
I reckon that's probably 5-10 years down the line.
5 years. I won't go as far as 10, but yeah.
It's because they've got the money to throw at it. That's why 5 years, I'd say, is probably a reasonable guess.
If it's any quicker than that, they're doing it too quick and they're destined to fail.
Yeah. Well, maybe they may not fail because, money does kind of compensate for a lot of things.
And money without any direction, no, doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why I mentioned the research and development. If to take the time of that, maybe there's something better for them than failed games and closed studios.
See, what I would have loved for Google and Amazon to do, what I would have loved for them to try their hand at, and, if they want to take this idea and run with it, then, a small commission fee would be nice. But I would have loved for either of them to basically have a look at the indie games development side of things, right? Because there are a lot of really, really interesting and creative people in the indie games development side. And they could have created these platforms for indie game devs to basically showcase what they're making. And there are people who are doing that now, and it's turning into quite a lucrative industry.
Just to expand upon that, I mean, it's lucrative, but there's still a vast majority of gamers who will look at indie games and go, I'm not playing that stupid little indie game.
Yeah.
Having a company like Amazon or Google legitimize it would legitimize indie gaming as a type of gaming in the same way that indie films have been legitimized.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would love to see that happen, but I don't think it is going to. I think everyone's too focused on the shiny, pretty colors of AAA gaming.
After the big bucks of the AAA.
Yeah. And that, ironically, does kind of lead us to our last story, which is more of a rumor than anything else. See, Star Wars Insider Bespin Bulletin, which is generally a reliable track record. It has a fairly reliable track record when it comes to Star Wars rumors and news. They reported back in January on a podcast episode that a new Knights of the Old Republic game was in development, and it wasn't being made by EA and possibly not even by BioWare.
Well, right? It is basically open tender for Star Wars licenses now.
Yeah. According to Bespin Bulletin, amongst my digging, I heard that there is a Knights of the Old Republic project in development somewhere. I talked to a couple of people, and I also found out that Jason Schreier said that it's not with EA, and we'll never guess who the studio is that's making the game.
It's Jason Schreier, but yeah.
Jason Schreier, but, he made that comment in the Reset forums back in December. Nobody's going to guess right, that's for sure. And that's, for me, really interesting, because I'm a big fan of the original 2 Knights of the Old Republic games. Big fan.
That's going back a while. So just for people who don't know, what is it, a Knight of the Old Republic game?
Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, the whole idea of them was that the choices that you made had consequences. It was one of the first games where choice and consequence became a big part of the actual gameplay. And so the choices that you made leaned you towards the light side or the dark side as a natural process in the game, And that's one of the things that set those 2 games apart. They obviously, it was early BioWare gaming as well, and BioWare at that point were really focused on narrative development and really focused on showcasing characters and story and things like that. And so what you had were these 2 games that came out that are legendary in Star Wars fandom and in Star Wars communities for being kind of the essence of a Star Wars game. These were games that were coming out on the back of the Jedi Knight games, Jedi Academy and stuff like that.
I don't want to make an assumption that's completely wrong, but from the outside in, not being a big Star Wars gamer, the 90s was kind of like golden age for the Star Wars game, wasn't it?
90s, early 90s, yeah, because you had, on the PC side of things, you had X-Wing and X-Wing versus TIE Fighter and TIE Fighter, which were great simulation games, great space combat games. You had what was it?
Pod racing. Where's my hand? Pod racing. There's my finger.
Yeah, Star Wars pod racing. You had.
I love that game.
You had the Dark Empire games. What was it? Dark Forces games. You had Jedi Knight games that were coming out, which were cracking games. You had the Rogue Squadron games, which were again cracking games.
Yeah.
And then you had the joy that was the original Battlefront game on the Xbox, but then the even greater joy that was Battlefront 2 on the Xbox.
Here's the question now.
Yeah.
All of that reputation, all of those classic games and beloved games.
Yeah.
Could Knights of the Old Republic 3 live up to that legacy? Could it be what those are in today's world?
It very much...
If it's real, of course.
Yeah, if it's real. It very much depends, because they did do an MMO version of Knights of the Old Republic called The Old Republic, which ultimately didn't really work well. And I think one of the reasons for that is because it's nice and all to envision an Old Republic MMO type game where you can be Jedi or Sith. But I think when you're doing that, you kind of forego a lot of the lore that's in Star Wars, because in something like that, you only have this clear divide between light and dark. You can't really be somewhere in the middle.
So you can't be the grey side.
See, that's the thing. What a lot of people don't realize, but what a lot of Star Wars fans do know, is that there are Force users in the Star Wars universe who aren't Jedi and aren't Sith, but can use the Force. It's one of the reasons why I like Rogue Squadron as a movie, is because Donnie Yen's character in the movie...
Rogue One, you mean?
Sorry, Rogue One. Sorry, not Rogue Squadron. But I like that as a movie because Donnie Yen's character is clearly a Force user, right? But he's not Jedi and he's not Sith.
True.
So I like the fact that if the Star Wars universe in Rogue One started introducing characters like that.
However, you avoided the question altogether.
Sorry, I'm being political about this.
Sure.
Call me Boris.
So, right. Answer this question. Yes or no. Could an old Knights of Old Republic work in 2022, for example?
It depends on who's making it. If they basically take the format of the original 2 games and say, okay, this is the template we're using. We're not going to use the template from Battlefront 1 and 2 that EA did. We're going to use this template here, and we're going to tell a story with characters. If they do it like that, where they're telling a story with characters, where choice and consequences is a thing, and I'm not saying stick to the original format, obviously do your own thing, make it the way that you want to, but actually tell a story, because that's what Star Wars is. It's all about stories.
Yes. That was what Mandalorian was, wasn't it? Like stories from the Star Wars verse.
And the thing is, you can have good characters, you can have bad characters, you can have anti-heroes, you can have anti-villains, you can have that's a term that doesn't get used a lot, anti-villain.
Well, it's sort of chaotic good, isn't it? In D&D terms.
And you can have all of these characters on show. I think in modern terms, I think it should be less kind of Jedi versus Sith and more just about opening up the world and exploring the universe of Star Wars.
So here's a follow-up question. Do you want a Knight of the Old Republic free? I add the caveat to that question because games recently have a history of reviving these old products and making an absolute ham-fist of them. And there's always that element of the internet that says, oh, you ruined my childhood. And your childhood's still there. There's nothing happened to it. It's still intact.
Exactly.
But it tarnishes legacy. With all that considered, do you want a Knights of the Old Republic free?
Yes.
Okay.
I can say categorically yes. There is a reason for that. It's Star Wars. The reputation's tarnished already,
It's a messy reputation, yeah. Yeah,
it's a messy reputation. And it has been ever since... I think the problem I have with Star Wars is it's not the prequel trilogy. It's not the trilogy that came after the original, the original trilogy. It's not none of those, right?
It's the problem bloody remasters that got rid of all the old practical effects. Damn you, Lucas.
The problem I have with Star Wars is that Disney, in their infinite wisdom, pardon me while I vomit, decided to get rid of the expanded universe, and that was like over a decade of added content that was in the form of comics and books and stories and all sorts of other stuff. And they decided to just basically get rid of all of that and redo it with their own Disneyfied vision. And that's what a lot of Star Wars fans absolutely hated. So what they got rid of were characters like Mara Jade Skywalker, Luke's wife.
Interesting.
Right? Who was basically an assassin raised by the Emperor and sent to kill Luke Skywalker.
Okay. I've got a feeling that you could dig deep on this stuff, so let's just draw
I am a Star Wars fan, so we'll end it there.
A line in the sand for this week's episode of news trash. I said news trash on last week's episode, no thrash, news thrash, which is a totally different thing. We haven't got the hair for news thrash.
I used to though.
Yeah, but news trash, that is it for this week. So if you're listening as part of our podcast feed, in which if you subscribe to Impossible Mission, you'll get this, you'll get Monthly Marmalade, and you'll get Impossible Mission. Yeah, as one sort of all. The feed is, if you go into your podcast provider and search for the Impossible Mission Omni feed, there you go. You'll get it. But if you're watching on YouTube, thank you very much. Comment below to add conversation to any of the topics that we brought up. We'd be happy to chat it out with you.
Yeah.
But I think that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so that's it for this week. We'll be back next Monday with more news and more trash. And maybe a trailer, if there is any. But until then, thanks for watching and listening.
Bye.